My mother stood up before dessert was served. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look nervous. "I think it's time everyone knows," she said, smiling thinly, "that Patricia is officially cut off. I won't enable laziness anymore." The word lazy landed like a slap. My chest tightened. I looked around the table, searching for a face that looked confused or shocked or angry on my behalf. Most people avoided my eyes. Someone chuckled. I felt heat crawl up my neck, my hands curling into my napkin as if that tiny piece of fabric could keep me anchored to my chair. I didn't speak. I couldn't, because I finally understood something at that moment. This wasn't about money. This was about humiliation. She wanted everyone to see me as the failure she'd been painting me as for years. And before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you're watching from tonight. Drop your city in the comments because this story gets wild. My mother kept talking. She listed my failures like bullet points in a presentation. No ambition, no gratitude, always needing help, always falling short. I stared at the condensation sliding down my water glass, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I was sure others could hear it. This is deliberate, I thought. She planned this. My aunt nodded along. My uncle shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My cousin Tyler scrolled through his phone like this was just another boring family moment. The room felt smaller. The air is heavier. I forced my face into stillness while my stomach twisted into knots. I realized something terrifying in that moment. She wanted me small. She needed me. And the worst part? She was doing it in front of everyone so they'd all believe her version of who I was. So they'd all think I deserved whatever came next. At the family dinner, my mother announced I was being cut off for being lazy. So I stayed silent. Not because I agreed. Not because I was weak. But because somewhere between the insult and the laughter, a colder, clearer thought surfaced. If this is the story she's telling about me, I'll let her finish it. I'll let her believe she won. Because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she'd been planning it. I smiled politely when she finally sat down. I thanked everyone for dinner. I even hugged my mother before I left, and she hugged me back like she'd won some great victory. The drive home was silent except for the hum of my tires on asphalt. And by the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, the sadness had sharpened into something else entirely. Resolve. My name is Patricia, and I'm in my early 30s. I'm sitting here now, months after that dinner, in an apartment my mother has never seen. A place she doesn't know exists. For years, I let her control the story of my life. I let her tell people I was dependent, struggling, barely keeping my head above water. I never corrected her. I thought loyalty meant silence. I thought love meant endurance. But that night, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror with mascara streaking down my cheeks, I realized something simple and devastating. She didn't misunderstand me. She used me. And she'd been doing it for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. If you've ever been called lazy by someone who never saw how hard you worked, hit that like button. You'll understand why what happened next felt like justice. Years earlier, I'd paused my career to help my mother through one of her rough periods. She was struggling financially after her divorce, struggling emotionally. She needed someone, and I was the oldest daughter, the responsible one. So I moved back home for 18 months. I paid half the bills. I covered groceries. I drove her to appointments. I listened to her cry at 2 in the morning about how unfair life was. And when she finally got back on her feet, when she started working again and dadding again and laughing again, I quietly went back to rebuilding my own life. I never asked for repayment. I never threw it in her face. I thought that's what my family did. But she never told anyone that part of the story. When people asked how she survived that time, she said she pushed through on her own. When they asked about me, she said I was still figuring things out. By the time of that dinner, I'd been working at a corporate office for 3 years. Open floor plan, constant deadlines, performance metrics that didn't care about your personal life. I stayed late most nights. I delivered results ahead of schedule. I kept my head down and let my work speak for itself. Lazy was the last word anyone at my job would use to describe me. But my mother didn't know that. She didn't know because I'd stopped telling her about my wins. Every time I shared good news, she'd find a way to shrink it. A promotion became just a small raise. A completed project became lucky timing, so I stopped sharing. I started keeping my professional life separate from my family life. And the less she knew, the more confidently she filled in the blanks with her own version. A version where I was barely surviving. A version where she was still carrying me. The night after the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fans spinning in the dark. My phone was off. I'd silenced the family group chat where people were probably still talking about me, probably agreeing with her, probably shaking their heads about poor Patricia who just can't get it together. But lying there in the quiet, something clicked. She didn't just misunderstand me. She needed me to be the failure. Because if I succeeded, if I stood on my own, then her story fell apart. Then people might start asking questions. They might wonder why she talks about me the way she does. They might notice the pattern. And that terrified her more than anything. So she struck first. She cut me off publicly before I could walk away privately. She made sure everyone would blame me for the distance that was already growing between us. I made a decision that night. I wouldn't defend myself. I wouldn't call family members and explain my side. I wouldn't post on social media about what really happened. I would simply disappear from her narrative. Let her tell whatever story she wanted. Let her believe I was sitting at home devastated and desperate. Meanwhile, I would move forward so quietly she wouldn't notice until it was too late. I started documenting everything, every bill I'd paid for her. Every time she'd taken credit for my ideas at family events. Every moment she dismissed my achievements while celebrating my younger brother's mediocre ones. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted clarity. I needed to see the pattern written down in black and white, and once I did, I couldn't unsee it. The evidence was overwhelming. She'd been building this story for years. At work, I kept my head down and my focus sharp. 3 weeks after the dinner, I applied for an internal position that had just opened. Senior project manager. Significant pay increase. Full autonomy. I'd been watching that role for months, quietly building the skills they wanted, networking with the right people. When the job was posted, I was the first application submitted. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning. I took the day off, told no one where I was going, and walked into that conference room with my shoulders back. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. 3 directors sat across from me with printed copies of my resume. For 40 minutes, I spoke clearly about my work, my completed projects, my leadership during crisis moments, my vision for the role. My voice didn't shake. For the first time in years, I didn't minimize myself. I didn't deflect praise or credit luck. I owned what I'd built. I got the promotion. The offer came through the following Monday, $20,000 salary increase, private office, direct reports. I stared at the email for a full minute before it sank in. Then I cried, not sad tears, relief tears, validation tears, tears that came from finally being seen for who I actually was instead of who my mother said I was. I accepted immediately. I didn't tell anyone in my family, not my mother, not my aunt. Not even Tyler, who sometimes texted me outside the group chat. I updated my LinkedIn quietly, changed my email signature. I started my new role the next week, and life continued as if nothing had changed, except everything had changed. For the first time in years, I had financial independence that nobody in my family knew about. Security they couldn't touch, power they couldn't take away, and I carried that knowledge like a secret weapon. My mother grew bolder over the next few weeks. She posted on Facebook about cutting off dead weight. She told relatives I'd probably come crawling back soon. At a family birthday party I skipped, she apparently joked that I was finally learning what real life costs. My aunt called me after that party, her voice dripping with pity. "Patricia, honey, your mother is worried about you. Maybe you should reach out, apologize, you know how she gets." I responded calmly. "I'm doing fine, Aunt Michelle." "Better than fine, actually, but thank you for checking." There was a pause. "Well, if you need anything, I won't, but I appreciate it." I hung up before she could press further. The pattern was obvious now. My mother was controlling the narrative and everyone was buying it without question. But I wasn't going to fight that battle. I was going to let reality do the work for me. At her workplace, my mother had always been confident, maybe too confident. She worked as an office administrator at a mid-sized consulting firm. She'd been there for 8 years, long enough to feel untouchable, long enough to believe the rules bent around her. I'd heard stories over the years, how she spoke to junior staff, how she dismissed people's concerns, how she took credit when things went right and deflected blame when they didn't. I'd always written it off as office politics. People exaggerate. People hold grudges. But then I started paying attention differently. I started listening when relatives mentioned her job, started noticing the tension in her voice when she talked about certain coworkers, started seeing the cracks forming in her confidence. She'd overstepped somewhere. said something she shouldn't have, and people were starting to notice. Not loudly, not publicly, but quietly. The way office politics always start, with whispers and email chains and closed-door meetings. 2 months after the dinner, something shifted at her workplace. I only know because my cousin Tyler mentioned it casually during a text conversation. "Your mom's been stressed lately, something about work." I didn't ask for details. I just said I hoped she was okay. But curiosity got the better of me. I checked her Facebook. Her posts had become defensive. Vague complaints about workplace drama and people who don't know their place. Comments about loyalty being dead. References to standing your ground even when others try to tear you down. Classic signs of someone in professional trouble. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just a cold, clear recognition. The same confidence that let her humiliate me publicly was the same confidence that was destroying her professionally. She believed she was untouchable, and that belief was about to cost her everything. Her slip happened at a staff meeting. I didn't witness it, but I heard about it later through the grapevine. Family friends who knew people who worked there, small town networks being what they are. Apparently she dismissed a colleague's idea publicly. I talked to them, said something dismissive about their competence. The colleague was newer, younger, someone my mother saw as beneath her. But that colleague was also well-liked, respected, connected, and my mother's comments didn't go unnoticed. An email was sent to HR, not from the colleague, from someone else who'd witnessed it, then another email, then another. People started sharing stories, moments they'd brushed off before, comments that hadn't seemed worth reporting at the time, but together they painted a picture, a pattern of behavior, dismissiveness, credit-taking, unprofessionalism. My mother laughed it off at first, called it a misunderstanding, said people were too sensitive these days, but HR didn't laugh. They opened an investigation. I found out about the investigation from Tyler. He texted me late one night. "Mom's freaking out about work stuff. She might get suspended, just thought you should know." I stared at that message for a long time. A year ago, I would have called her immediately, offering support, asked what I could do. But now I typed back, "That's tough, hope it works out." Nothing more. Tyler sent back a confused emoji but didn't push. The truth was I felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction. No urge to rescue her, just a quiet recognition that consequences were finally catching up. And maybe that's what freedom actually felt like. Not revenge, not vindication, just the absence of obligation. The ability to let someone face their own choices without feeling responsible for fixing it. My mother had spent years building a reputation. At work, at home, with family. And that reputation was finally being examined, really examined. Not by me, by everyone else. The suspension came through 3 weeks later, 2 weeks unpaid while they completed the investigation. My mother called me for the first time since dinner. I let it ring. She called again. Ring. A third time I answered. "Hello, Patricia." Her voice was tight, angry. "I assume you've heard." "Heard what?" Playing dumb felt surprisingly easy. "About work, about the suspension, about people lying to make me look bad." I paused. "I'm sorry that's happening. That sounds really stressful." Silence. She'd expected something different, sympathy maybe, or an offer to help. Instead, I gave her nothing. "That's it," she finally said. "That's all you have to say." "What would you like me to say, Mom?" My voice stayed calm, even. "I hope it works out. I hope the truth comes through." "The truth," she repeated bitterly. "The truth is people are jealous. They can't stand seeing someone confident." "Maybe." I didn't argue, didn't defend. Didn't engage. "I have to go, work in the morning." I hung up before she could respond. Over the next month, I watched from a distance as her life quietly unraveled. Not dramatically, not publicly, but steadily. The investigation concluded. She wasn't fired, but she was demoted, moved to a different department, stripped of the supervisory responsibilities she'd held for years. Her Facebook posts became angrier, more defensive, longer rants about betrayal and fake people and how the world punishes strength. Family members started reaching out to me with concern. Had I talked to her? Was she okay? Did I know what was happening? I responded the same way every time, calmly, briefly, with just enough concern to seem normal but not enough to invite deeper conversation. "I'm sure she'll figure it out. She's always been strong." And I meant it. She was strong. Strong enough to humiliate me publicly. Strong enough to build an entire narrative around my failures. She'd be strong enough to handle the consequences of her own choices too. Meanwhile, my life was flourishing in ways my family never saw. My new role was challenging but rewarding. I led a team of 6 people. We delivered projects ahead of schedule. I got praised in company-wide emails. My name was mentioned in quarterly reviews as an example of leadership done right. I started saving aggressively, built an emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses, opened a retirement account I actually contributed to regularly. I started looking at houses in neighborhoods I'd only dreamed about before. Every morning, I woke up in my quiet apartment with sunlight coming through the windows I'd chosen. I made coffee in the kitchen I kept clean because it was mine. I dressed in clothes I'd bought with money no one could touch. And I drove to work knowing that everything I had, I'd built myself. No help, no handouts, no strings attached. The life my mother said I was too lazy to create was the exact life I was living. And she had no idea. 6 months after the dinner, my mother reached out again, this time through email. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." I opened it, read it slowly. It was long, rambling, half apology, half justification. She was sorry if she'd hurt me. She'd been under stress. Work had been difficult. She'd been dealing with things I didn't understand. But also, I needed to understand her perspective. She'd only been trying to help me, trying to push me toward independence. Sometimes tough love was necessary. The email ended with a request. Could we meet for coffee, talk things through, move forward? I closed the laptop, didn't respond, not out of spite, but because I finally understood something crucial. She wasn't apologizing for what she did. She was apologizing for how it looked. She wasn't sorry for humiliating me. She was sorry that her own life had fallen apart afterward. And that wasn't the same thing. That would never be the same thing. A week later, Tyler called me. "Mom's really struggling, Patricia. I think you should talk to her. Whatever happened between you two, family is family." I took a breath. "Tyler, I love you, but I'm not discussing this. She's your mother. She made a mistake. People make mistakes." "She didn't make a mistake," I said carefully. "She made a choice, and I'm making one too. I'm choosing peace." "That's cold." "Maybe, but it's mine to choose." He hung up frustrated. I sat there holding my phone, waiting for guilt to crash over me. It didn't come. Instead, I felt clear, settled. I'd spent years trying to be the daughter she wanted, trying to fit into the story she told about me, trying to prove I was worthy of basic respect, and it had never been enough. Nothing would ever be enough, because the problem wasn't me. It never had been. The problem was that she needed someone to be less than her, and I'd finally stopped volunteering for that role. 1 year after the dinner, I bought a house. Nothing massive, nothing showy, just a small 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. I closed on a Tuesday afternoon, signed the papers in a title office that smelled like old carpet and fresh coffee. When the agent handed me the keys, I sat in my car and cried for the second time since that dinner. Not sad tears, grateful tears, disbelief tears. I'd done it, completely on my own. No cosigner, no family loan. No safety net. Just me, my income, my credit, my savings. I drove to the house slowly, parked in the driveway that was now mine. I walked up to the front door and unlocked it. The house was empty, quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows onto hardwood floors that creaked slightly when I walked. I stood in the living room and realized something stunning. My mother's voice wasn't in my head anymore. Her judgment, her criticisms, her version of who I was, all of it had finally gone quiet. I didn't post about the house on social media. Didn't tell the extended family. Didn't send pictures to anyone except my 2 closest friends who'd supported me through everything. I moved in quietly over the weekend. Unpacked boxes, hung curtains, arranged furniture, built a life in rooms my mother would never see, because this wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about proving her wrong. This was about building something so solid, so stable, so completely mine that her opinion stopped mattering. Tyler found out eventually. He texted me, "Heard you bought a house. That's amazing. Congrats." I thanked him. He asked for the address. I didn't give it. Some boundaries were permanent. My mother never reached out about it. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she knew and couldn't bring herself to acknowledge it. Either way, her silence was its own kind of answer. And I was fine with that. More than fine. I was free. 18 months after the dinner, I ran into my aunt at a grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, maybe even uncomfortable. "Patricia, oh my goodness, how are you?" "I'm great, Aunt Michelle, really great." She studied my face like she was searching for cracks. "We've missed you at family events." "I've been busy, work's been good, life's been good." "Your mother," she started. I held up my hand gently. "I hope she's doing well, truly, but that chapter is closed for me." My aunt's face fell. "Family is everything, Patricia. Family is important," I corrected, "but peace is everything." I finished my shopping and left. drove home to my quiet house, made dinner in my kitchen, sat on my back porch watching the sunset, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Content. Not happy in some explosive, performative way, just quietly, deeply content. The kind of contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, living exactly the life you built, answering to no one but yourself. 2 years after the dinner, I got promoted again. Director level, corner office with windows. Salary that made my younger self's head spin. I'd worked for it, earned every dollar, every ounce of respect, every piece of recognition, and nobody could take that from me. Nobody could rewrite that story, because I'd built it in public, in front of witnesses, with documentation and results and proof. My mother's words from that dinner echoed sometimes. Lazy, ungrateful, dependent. But they didn't sting anymore. They just sounded hollow, empty, like someone describing a person who'd never existed, because the woman she described that night, she was fiction. A character my mother needed me to be so she could feel superior. But the woman I actually was, she was standing in a corner office overlooking the city, leading teams, closing deals, building wealth, living freely. And most importantly, she was doing it all without needing anyone's permission, without needing anyone's approval. Especially not her mother's. At the family dinner, my mother announced I was being cut off for being lazy, so I let her. I let her believe she'd won. I let her think I'd crumble without her support. I let her tell whatever story she needed to tell. And while she was busy talking, I was busy building. Building a career she never saw, building savings she never knew about, building a life she was never invited into. She wanted to cut me off. I wanted to be free. And in the end, we both got what we wanted. The difference is, she lost power chasing control. I gained everything by walking away. The person she called lazy built a life so solid it didn't need her approval, so stable it didn't need her validation, so complete it didn't need her at all. And that, more than anything, is the real ending. Not revenge, not vindication, just the quiet satisfaction of proving yourself right by living well. What would you do in this situation? Would you have stayed silent like I did, or confronted your family immediately? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. More stories about standing up, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself are coming. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Thanks for watching.